have everybody log in. We appreciate you being here. And thanks for attending UAGC for our information session today with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security investigations.
Warner, can you see the slide?
I can.
Awesome.
All righty. Well, thank you again for everyone for being here and attending our next information session here with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security investigations. They're also known, by the way, as HSI. So we'll be using that abbreviation here throughout this presentation. My name is Warner Petzold. I'm an employer outreach specialist for the University of Arizona Global Campus. We are excited you could join us today and learn more about the exciting career opportunities with HSI. Before I turn the floor over to HSI, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded. So for all those who registered for today's information session, the recording will be emailed to you in a few days. We will take time to answer as many questions as possible during and at the end of the presentation. At the bottom of the screen is a Q&A button. You can submit questions with your name or anonymously to be answered live. We will do our best to get to as many questions as we can. However, if your question is not answered by the end of the presentation, you can email it to careerservices@uagc.edu. We will follow up with HSI to get any remaining questions answered. Also, feel free to engage in the chat. You can pose questions in the chat, and members of the Career Services team will be available to help answer questions throughout the presentation. If you have any technical difficulties, we recommend logging out of Zoom and logging back in. Now, I would like to introduce our guest employer. Joining us today is Jonathan Eben. He's a special agent and recruiter at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security investigations in Phoenix, Arizona. Special Agent Jonathan Eben began his law enforcement career in 1997 with a local police department in New Jersey, and he began his federal law enforcement service in 2007 with the U.S. Border Patrol in Douglas, Arizona. He then transferred to the enforcement and removal operations in 2009, and in 2016, became a special agent with the Homeland Security investigations in Phoenix field office. Jonathan has worked primarily narcotics-based investigations and in the cyber crimes group. He is a subject matter expert in aviation smuggling and has collateral duties as a recruiter, student intern coordinator, and manages the Citizens Academy program for HSI Phoenix. John, we're excited to hear about your presentation today. Thank you for joining us today, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Warner. We appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. It's a pleasure being here and being able to reach out to you folks. So basically what I'm going to start off with is a PowerPoint, and there is a video included. Because one of the things that we are often facing here in HSI is sort of I guess, a branding issue. A lot of people don't know who we are. And not to go too far into it before we get into the video and the PowerPoint, but we are the second largest investigative agency in the federal government, second in size to the FBI, but we actually have a scope of federal law that we cover that's actually greater than the FBI. Most of that stems from our Immigration and Customs Authority, but we do cover a huge spectrum and a lot of different programmatic areas, which we'll touch on. I don't like death by PowerPoint, so I'm going to try to move through the PowerPoint. I'm not going to rush through it, but I will try to move through it expeditiously, just to give you all a better idea of what we do, our mission, and the work environment that we have here at HSI. And then I'd like to turn over to questions and answers, because obviously you're going to learn a lot better by getting your questions responded to. So let's start with that, and bear with me. We were having a little user operator technical stuff earlier. That was me, but I think we're getting through it. Okay. Hopefully this is right. Warren, are we good?
Yes, looking good.
All right, let's get started here.
Murderous drug trafficker known as El Chapo. Now he is firmly in U.S. custody.
Hey, John, just be aware there's no volume. So
There's no volume.
Yeah, we can see it, but the volume's not there. And it's probably because it's a lot pumping through the internet. So it's probably, you know, it's way behind and it's at very, very low volume. So we can barely hear it. So no
Okay,
worries. We can include
apologize for that.
We can include the link when we send it out to everybody. We'll include this link because by the way, I don't have that video. I have a different video that I used.
Okay, that'll work.
But that's a really good one. I love this video. This is a good one.
Well, everyone can just imagine inspiring music behind this.
It's all good. The visuals are awesome. This is really good.
Play your own music in your head, I guess. Sorry, folks.
And I can see this is a very current video as well. I can see that.
Like I said, I know that I could have probably been narrating over this.
Yeah, sure. You can see it's high definition and it's definitely buffering. Yes, I agree, Tiffany. That's a really good point. And I'm sure John will be talking to all of you about that.
Okay, oh, come on. There we go. So, all right, we're back. So who we are the principal investigator arm of the Department of Homeland Security. And I did touch on this about how we rank in the size of agencies within the government as far as investigative agencies anyway. We have over 10,000 employees, 7,100 special agents. We have investigative research specialists. Those folks have actually been retitled criminal analysts. I didn't catch that. I'll have to take care of that. We have over 250 domestic offices, and we currently have approximately 92 international offices in 68 countries around the world. So we have an international footprint that a lot of other agencies, you know, can't compare to. If you're interested in international travel, international work, we certainly have that to offer. not only in long-term postings as far as in attaché offices and so forth, but also occasionally, your work, your investigations here on the domestic side will take you overseas. Our cyber group, for example, last summer, about half the group went to Australia for about 10 days and wrapped up a number of targets over there with the Australian Federal Police. It was a nice operation. It was successful. Admittedly, those guys in the group, they definitely had a good time traveling. So our mission, we investigate, we disrupt and dismantle terrorist, transnational, and other criminal organizations. We can go out and make street arrests. As a police officer, I went out and made street arrests all the time, and that's fine. It hopefully helps the community and so forth. But what HSI focuses on largely are longer term investigations that are going to dismantle entire criminal organizations. We had one such case that took place last year, culminated in a very big operation here in Phoenix in January. It's still an ongoing case. I can't talk about too much in detail about it, but we made something like 14 arrests within a single day and seized a tremendous number of assets, narcotics, weapons, vehicles, you name it. We literally took that organization down in one fell swoop. Took a little while to build up the case, but we certainly made quite a dent. And then, of course, these are some of the different areas that we cover in transnational criminal investigations. Everything from, what someone might think of as Homeland Security with border protection, obviously monitoring who's coming in to the country, trying to weed out people on terrorist watch lists and so forth, which, our partner agencies and Customs and Border Protection and Border Patrol are certainly busy doing these days. But we also are concerned with, general public safety, public health. And again, we'll get into some of the programmatic areas we cover. You'll see where it touches on the health system and pharmaceuticals and so forth. Generally, again, U.S. economy, technology, global trade. We'll go into some more details. So unfortunately, they didn't really update a lot of the PowerPoints. So some of these are literally pre-COVID. We sort of had this gap where they were not putting out a lot of public material. So some of these numbers are back in 2019. But they just started releasing the fiscal year 23 numbers this morning. And I just added this one in today, just as an example of some of the problems that we're facing as a nation and individual communities. If you see from the 2019 numbers, the pounds of opioid seized were 12,466, and that's all opioids. The fiscal numbers here are pretty astounding for fiscal year 23. We seized over 50,000 pounds of opioids. And that includes 41,000 plus pounds of fentanyl. So, I mean, you're looking at in 4 years' time, a 400% increase in the numbers. It's extraordinary. So these are some of the challenges that we're facing, down here at the border and as a nation as a whole. And again, I touched on international operations. Right now, again, the numbers usually fluctuate. 13, 14, 15 countries. Where we might be involved in transnational investigative units or task forces, many of which are HSI led. So we do have a fantastic relationship with our global partners and Interpol. So again, if that's something that you're interested in, or you have language skills that you might want to put to good use overseas. And again, our offices span around the globe. It's not, just concentrated in Europe or Central America. We have folks in Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and again, all points of the globe. And again, I think this touches on also collaborative partnerships that we have here domestically. Again, we work very closely with all levels of law enforcement and other government agencies. Okay. And again, this just kind of covers again a lot of the general areas: financial crimes, money laundering crimes, white collar crime, cyber crimes. A lot of our cyber crimes, and this is a huge growth industry, growth area, I should say, because so much comes back to the use of electronics, cellular phones, laptops. The bad guys use them too. But a lot of times our focus with cyber crimes is going to be child exploitation, the proliferation of child pornography, for example. We also do counter intrusion work. We do cryptocurrency, other things in that realm, but a lot of the time that is spent by our cyber groups as, for better or for worse, it's good that we're combating it, but obviously it's a problem that it's even out there, are crimes against children. So that's something that's very, very much on our mind. And again, touches on child exploitation, national security. Again, that's going to be a lot of war criminals. We do war criminal investigations, terrorist investigations. We have people embedded with JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force, human trafficking, and that's certainly been something that's been in the news a lot lately. Something we're very much aware of that's occurring here in the United States, and we're definitely focusing a lot of our efforts on that. Human smuggling. Again, we leave a lot of the individual immigration enforcement to our partners over at ERO. But again, we dismantle criminal organizations. So what we're looking at are the human smuggling networks. And, for those not too familiar with it, you have human smuggling situations where people willingly enter into an agreement with, an organization to smuggle them from A to B, usually across the border. But they very often, all too often, tend to mutate over into a human trafficking situation, where they're suddenly, now find themselves sort of indentured to these organizations. So they're kind of part and parcel as far as our investigations are concerned. Transnational gangs, I think, should be self-explanatory because they definitely pose a threat to our communities. Counterproliferation, what that primarily covers is weapons trafficking going outside of the United States, also sensitive components, maybe critical components for, an engine for certain types of fighter jets that we don't necessarily want going overseas or falling into certain nation states' hands, because, well, without those parts, those planes, can remain grounded. Iran is one of those nation states that readily comes to mind that we might want to be concerned about, or North Korea getting certain parts. Narcotics enforcement, again, big area that we investigate here, especially in the border. And you saw the numbers earlier. So obviously that's definitely a threat to our communities. We have, people unfortunately overdosing in the six figures annually now in the United States. So it's definitely a threat to safety and again, our communities. Worksite enforcement, we've backed away from that quite a bit. It's still up there, but we don't really do too much in that realm anymore. Again, we leave some of that to our ERO partners. And identity benefit fraud, again, fraudulent documents, also benefits fraud. Again, it's a form of financial crimes, but definitely has its own category. And then intellectual property and trade enforcement. That's going to be everything from counterfeit NFL gear to Gucci bags to pharmaceuticals. And again, that's a health safety concern. Also, airbags, counterfeit airbags. We had one case here locally where there was a gentleman who was selling cell phone batteries and laptop batteries and so forth, labeling them as original manufactured products, Hewlett-Packard, Apple, and so forth. And these are all subpar components that were coming over from China, very cheaply made, and were literally causing people's homes to burn down. They were starting fires, and people were losing everything they had because this individual decided to counterfeit these products. And so obviously these are the things that concern us. And again, this just covers some of the individual areas that we discussed just a moment ago. Again, these numbers are going to fluctuate, but you can get an idea of the scale. When we're talking about 1.4 million pounds back in 2019, that number has gone up again. I don't have all the numbers yet, but again, you get an idea. And most of the crimes, with maybe the exception of the child pornography, even that to some degree, a lot of them have a nexus. Really, it's about making money for the bad guys. These are illicit funds. They need to launder their money. They need to move their money. They need to maybe send it overseas. So again, this is definitely a specialized area that we work at. And again, cyber crimes here, darknet activity, communications between criminal networks. That's important. And again, child porn being exchanged over the internet. Some more on that. Homeland Security and counterterrorism. And again, when people hear Homeland Security, a lot of times they immediately think of terrorism, and naturally they should. The agency was formed in 2003 following 9/11, and a lot of that focus at that time was counterterrorism. Obviously, we've grown and we've expanded, and because we were comprised of a couple of different agencies when we were created, we took on various tasks. But this has definitely been at our core and something that we are keenly aware of. And as I said before, we do have human trafficking. It does take place here in the United States. It's not just overseas. Again, with our overseas offices, we are working with our partner nations. Particularly in Asia, we have a problem with sex tourism. And we are definitely interested in U.S. citizens. Just because you leave U.S. soil doesn't mean you're not accountable to laws of certainly the nation that you're visiting and the U.S. laws. Because guess what? You arranged for that sex tourism while you're here in the United States. So we still have a vested interest in prosecuting those type of activities. So it takes place overseas, of course, but it does happen here domestically. A lot of times our vulnerable immigrant populations are subject to this type of treatment where they are, given, exorbitant bills for their crossings, and now they're told they have to work it off. We see things where individuals or organizations are taking their travel documents. These folks don't speak the language. They don't know any better. They're kept in, arranged housing and very much isolated from the rest of the country. They don't know how to navigate around the U.S., who to speak with, maybe because of experiences in their home country. They're afraid of authorities. So they end up getting put into either, some type of manufacturing job or agricultural job, sex trafficking, of course. And, some of these are literally, the nail salons and massage parlors, some manufacturing plants and so forth. So this is something that does take place every day. And again, I touched on this. This, again, is we're looking at the organizations that are arranging this, that are profiting from this. And again, very often feeding other areas like human trafficking. Again, transnational crimes, going after those criminals. Again, they have organizations within neighborhoods, within municipalities and cities, where they're doing, all sorts of nefarious activity, ranging from, narcotics trafficking, extortion, and again, they get into prostitution and other trafficking activities as well. Again, I talked about this as well earlier with the weapons going overseas, ammunition going overseas. It also could be trade secrets, industrial secrets, and so forth. Again, I'm just going to keep moving through these because I'd like to get to your questions. And again, we talked about intellectual property and trade fraud. It's not just the sports memorabilia and other things. Obviously, that's certainly fraud. And it does affect industries because guess what? Those genuine NFL t-shirts are as highly priced as they are because in part they've got to deal with combating the counterfeiting that's going on. So anything that affects an industry is going to, their bottom line, they're going to pass on the cost to the consumer, unfortunately. So the application process, and this is really focusing on the 1811 position. That's the job series for special agents, criminal investigators. It starts out with an application through usajobs.gov. Now we have to have an announcement first before anyone can apply. So you have to look for postings, and those are right now, I think we're doing about 2 a year, and there's only open for about 5 days at a time. I've seen as many as 1,500 applications coming in within the first 2 hours of the posting. So I always encourage people to apply as soon as possible. If you don't have a USA Jobs account, I do recommend setting one up well in advance. You can upload critical documents, resumes, degrees, DD-214s for veterans, anything that's pertinent. And that way, when a job does post, you can hit apply, attach your documents, answer whatever preliminary questions there are, and send it right in right away. Very often with these special agent positions anyway, they will open it on a given date, give a closing date. However, there is very often a limit, a cap on the number of applications that we'll be accepting. And that could be 3,500, it could be 5,000. It can vary depending on what Office of Personnel Management has determined they need to fill the vacancies that we have. So people look at it, they say, well, I'm working, I'm busy, I've got this family commitment, I've got until Friday, no problem. They go to log on Wednesday evening and the job is no longer posted. So again, I always suggest get your ducks in a row, ready to go, hit that apply button, and you're off to the races. We do have I have been told we have an announcement for special agents coming available next, well, excuse me, we're still in November. So January, just a little over a month from now. They said end of January. That's usually kind of a soft date. I haven't been given an exact date yet, but they did say the end of January. So I imagine probably the last week of January, possibly into February. But there is one coming up soon. That's going to be open to all U.S. citizens. There are some announcements that are specific for females. We've been having a very big push for a 30% female agent workforce, and actually just workforce across the board. So there have been some female only announcements that have been posting, but January is for everyone. The next step, once you get your application in, and also just a quick word, minimum qualification is going to be either 4 years of law enforcement experience or a 4-year degree, and your degree can be in any field. There's nothing specific required as far as the degrees. The next step would be you'll get an email and you'll schedule a writing assessment. That is non-proctored. That is something that you can do from home or work. How they suggest you do it from somewhere where you can focus for about an hour uninterrupted, because there is a timer. And then you get that submitted. If that is, if you're found to be passing for that phase 2, phase 1 being the application, phase 2, the writing assessment, you move on to phase 3, and that's going to be the special agent test battery. That is a proctored exam, kind of a traditional law enforcement exam, what you might envision. That's going to be at a testing facility at a community college or certified testing facility. And you go in, log in, do your computer test battery. That can take, I think the current tests are slated for about 3.5 hours, 4 hours. It's changed a little bit over the years. When I took it, it was a 5-hour test. So they've cut back a little bit on it. The good news for many people is they took the math section out. So if you're not very good at math, or you haven't had any math classes recently, at least nothing too advanced, no worries. They did take the math out of it. They did, however, beef up the judgment testing section. Assuming you pass that, you move on to the structured interview, which consists of a board of 3 experienced agents. It's fairly straightforward structured interview. There's not really any wrong answers. They just try to assess people on the criteria that we've been given from headquarters. And that sometimes will go into a personal interview with 2 senior agents. I know, again, with COVID, some of this has changed because, again, people were not coming in person and they were doing a lot of these virtually. So I think that has been omitted, the personal interview at this point. I'll have to check with headquarters. And then there's a physical assessment as you get closer to going to the academy. And this, if you're physically, somewhat physically fit, this isn't too arduous. This is a lot easier, I think, than a lot of other agencies. It's 32 sit-ups in 1 minute, 220-yard sprint, 47.73 seconds, 22 push-ups in 1 minute, and 1.5 miles in 14:25. We've had some people look at this and say, I can walk that 1.5 miles in that time. And then, there's no more than 5 minutes resting period between the tests. Possible polygraph, generally during the background investigation, which is at the top secret level, as you can see there. The polygraph is really if there is some type of concern, red flag, or whatever. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It may be that someone has a lot of connections with foreign citizens. Could be, they spend a lot of time traveling overseas or what have you. Right now, I think polygraphs are running about 17% of our applicants or less. I think between 14 and 17%. So it's not a lot. People do pass them. I mean, it's not because you get a polygraph test doesn't mean it's a bad thing or you're not going to pass. and honestly, I also think the polygraphers need to justify their job, so they might, do a few arbitrarily or randomly. But nobody's being, picked on or anything like that. We don't have too many problems with that. Some additional positions within HSI. Again, I've been focusing on the 1811 criminal investigator position. We have criminal analysts, and criminal analysts, they used to be the intelligence research specialists. They can be critical to our cases. These are folks that are doing those really cool, what we call I2 charts, where you see all the photos and all the lines connecting everyone and sort of literally connecting the dots. But they do target packages for us. They do deep dives into databases. They'll do, I guess they call it, scrapes on social media accounts and things like that. They can help us locate some of our subjects of interest or targets. Someone might have a warrant, we need to track them down. They will help us try to locate where that person is. And good criminal analysts can make or break a case, and they really can. And we've got some really good ones here in Phoenix. Love working with them. And they are definitely considered, as everyone else is, in equal standing within our teams at all of our offices. You're never going to see, I would be shocked to see in any HSI office where, the agents are, feel that they're above everyone else and, sort of dumping work on anyone else. It's nothing like that. It's a very collaborative environment within HSI, and that's been fostered for many years. I think if there was an agent that disrespected a criminal analyst or anyone else, they would find themselves on the carpet in front of the special agent in charge very quickly. A very, again, collaborative work environment. Mission support specialists. These are our administrative folks, and they can move between different areas of specialization. But here, I'll give an example in Phoenix. And again, every office might do things a little bit differently. But we have some of our mission support specialists are really focused on human resource aspects, and they are the go-to people for that. Others will do logistics, as purchasing orders, keeping our offices well supplied, keeping the agents up to date on their equipment and so forth. Vehicle control officers, or VCOs, obviously they're helping maintain our fleet and manage that, issuing vehicles, ensuring that the agents are keeping up on maintenance and so forth, and our mileage logs. That's one of those things we don't like to do, but we have to. And of course, the travel coordinator, which, we have a fantastic gentleman here who does that for us. A lot of us will be lost in our travel system when we're planning travel for work, and he comes in and saves the day. But we also have seized property specialists. Again, those are people that are dealing with our evidence. They're going to be managing our evidence vaults and making sure that everything is in proper order, organized, and any notifications, anything has to be sent out to a higher level holding facility or out to testing labs. They're going to make sure that it gets done, whether they're doing it themselves or they are coordinating with the agent to have the agent do what needs to be taken care of. Technical enforcement officers, we don't have too many of these. But we do have a number of them at each field office. These are as our current TEO, he calls himself the Q branch, like from James Bond movies. He's our technical gadget guy, and they are in charge of body worn microphones, pole cams. We have light fixtures that will replace street lights that actually have cameras in them. Tracking devices and so forth that can be installed on vehicles. They are in charge of that. We've got some listening devices. Again, I can't get too much into it, but for our undercover officers and agents to wear, like during narcotics deals and so forth, things that are just incredible, mind-boggling. It's science fiction at this point, but it's very cool, and they're in charge of that. So people that have a strong technical background, that might be something of interest to them. Management and program analysis, that's really mostly a headquarters function. So that's going to be mostly in the DC area. And it has to do obviously with analysis of all of our different programmatic areas, budgets, and so forth. That's going to be headquarters functions. I don't deal with them very much, so I can't get too much into it because I just don't know. And our forensic interviewers. Again, we don't have too many of these folks. They do want to add some more. Again, unfortunately, because of the proliferation of, the child victims, and also just sex trafficking victims and so forth. I think that they're seeing a need for a greater number of forensic interviewers. We have one here in Phoenix. Yeah, she's fantastic, but she also has to cover a large region. So she spends a lot of time traveling, usually just a couple of days at a time, or maybe even an overnight trip. But these are the folks that are going to be speaking with our special victims, and they are a great resource to have. We also have other positions like an auditor. Again, we've backed off a lot of the worksite enforcement, and the auditors are now very often being utilized as sort of accounting reviewers for white collar crime, the financial crimes unit, looking for signs, indices of money laundering, circular movements of money, and so forth. And there's a few other positions here and there, but that's most of the positions that are available within HSI as far as our support staff. And finally, contact information. So as I said, usajobs.gov, that's going to be your go-to for all government jobs, really, for any agency. For information on HSI, we have ice.gov/careers. And there's podcasts on there like Day in the Life of an Agent, various details on the different jobs, which I just covered as well. Questions and answers, frequently asked questions. Again, we are also getting our own public-facing HSI website. It is in development. Part of the delay is because we're in a continuing resolution for our budget, so they have to wait for all the funding to be fully approved, and they're going to move forward with that. We are getting out from underneath the umbrella of ICE. It's taken on certain negative content. A lot of that, when people are thinking of headquarters and the administration, has made it very clear that they want HSI standing out on its own far more, and to make our agency and our mission more recognizable. So we do want to stand apart from ERO. To contact a recruiter, best thing to do is actually Google your local HSI office. If you're in Baltimore, Chicago, Nashville, wherever you may be in the country, just get on Google, find a local HSI office, give them a call at their main line, ask for a recruiter. If you do have any problems getting a hold of a recruiter at your local office, you can write us at the email address HSI Phoenix Recruiting. And actually that's changed. You know what? That's my fault. I apologize. If you are copying that down, it's HSI Phoenix Recruiting at hsi.dhs.gov. And again, that's going to be at hsi.dhs.gov. It is a collateral duty for us, so I apologize if we don't answer immediately to that address. We try to check that mailbox a couple times a week. Sometimes there's a delay. I apologize. But that's, yet again, we're really equipped for recruiting here in Phoenix. We have recruiters all over the country, so it's a little hard to deal with, inquiries and so forth from all over. But if you do have any type of problem getting a hold of your local recruiter, do drop us a line and we'll try to put you in touch with somebody as soon as possible. And I think that's about it. And we can probably go to questions and answers.
Absolutely. Thank you for that presentation, John.
Sure.
That was amazing. Learned a lot. Didn't even know some of that stuff. And I'm sure a lot of our students and graduates also did learn a lot there. So thank you for that. So let's take a look at the questions that we have coming in. Let me see here. I'm just trying to get to some of them. We have several that were coming in. Let's see. All right, so let's take a look. We have, how rigorous are the requirements even if you're prior military? That's a good question.
How rigorous are the requirements? Are we assuming just resume requirements or
I think they might be referring to probably the physical requirements. I know you touched on that earlier in your presentation, but I think I think that's where they're going with that.
Yeah, no, it's the same for everyone. It's the 22 sit-ups and the 32 push-ups, the 1.5 miles and 14, 27 or whatever it is. So that's the same. That's across the board. That's going to be the same.
Understood. And I know you mentioned earlier, even when we were talking about doing or having work overseas. So one of the questions that was posed here anonymously was, do the roles require, or I guess all the roles require travel?
Not all the roles require travel. The criminal analysts, they do have opportunities if they want to put in for it for overseas positions. They can, overseas postings. Those are usually a few years at a time, just like the agents. You might, as an agent, have to do some travel. For example, I had a case a while back. I had to go interview a subject that was in custody in Buffalo. So I flew from Phoenix to Buffalo.
Understood.
I was there for 2 days, came right back. We do augment Secret Service every year because there's not a lot of Secret Service agents. They do have a lot of retention issues because of high attrition rates. So they're like, oh, well, where do we have a bunch of special agents that can do this? Oh, wait, within the DHS, we've got HSI. So we take on a role to augment them. And that's going to be for the Democratic and Republican national conventions when they have those major political events. We staff the headquarters, election headquarters for each respective candidate during the presidential election night. We also staff UNGA, United Nations General Assembly in New York, every September. And so if you see a foreign diplomat, president, prime minister moving with what appears to be a U.S. security team around the United Nations, those are probably HSI agents. Usually we have a Secret Service agent that will be one or two will act as liaison with the greater operation, but those are usually HSI agents. And that is usually a voluntary option. There are some people that love going to UNGA every year. Some people never want to go and they never do go. And then other people like alternate like every other year just to kind of give them something to do. Free trip to New York, a couple of dollars, for travel funding. We do get an allowance, for daily travel. So people want to do that, and that's fine. It's not usually, it's not mandated, and we never force anyone to move anywhere as an agent. The only time you might get a forced move, if you will, is if you're on the supervisory level and you have to do a rotation at headquarters, and that might be for a year or 18 months. And but again, that kind of comes with the promotion. Then you can go back to your home office. But usually, as a line rank and file agent, you're not mandated to move.
Got it. And one of the questions I often got when I was an Air Force recruiter, John, and they're asking it here, is what are the requirements as far as background checks and what will disqualify an individual as a candidate for a role at the Department of Homeland Security?
So the background investigators are separate from us. We don't really deal with them too much. That's actually a private, those are different security contractors, and then they go through the security screening unit at the Dallas Hiring Center. We always say what goes into the Dallas Hiring Center and what happens there is kind of necromancy. They have their own ways of doing things, but some of the qualifiers, disqualifiers, I should say, might be, if you had heavy drug use. Some people say, well, I experimented with drugs a little in high school. Okay, fine. As long as you disclose things, usually it's something they can work with. I don't know if they have any written standard. I think it's a case by case basis. But somebody who was like, well, I was addicted to cocaine until about a year ago. Yeah, you're not going to get hired. Maybe if you have heavy gang affiliations. But again, I think one of the key things with passing a background is being candid about it. Whatever is in your background, certainly if you're a convicted felon, that's going to be a disqualifier. But whatever might be there, put it down. Whatever they ask, put it down, and then you can always write a written explanation. And they've had some people where that had to put in a couple explanations, and they had to review it again, case by case basis, and they got signed off on. So I can't say specifics because again, it's every individual is different.
When in doubt, spell it out, right?
Yes.
Is there an age cap limit for hiring individuals?
Yes. You cannot have reached your 37th birthday for a special agent position. The other positions, support roles, different story. A lot of those do not have an age limit. The reason for the cap on the special agents is because we have a mandated retirement age of 57. So they want to ensure that you have a 20-year career. So it obviously gets pushed back to 37. If you have active military under your belt, again, on a case-by-case basis, they can waive your age based on your military service. They can take years off. And again, that goes to the Dallas Hiring Center.
It's great to hear. We have a lot of 7,000 to 8,000 military affiliated students that attend our university. So that's really important to know. The other thing is a great question here is what kind of training is required, and are there any certifications that one must earn to be competitive candidate? and to be successful at HSI?
Good question. So the training is 6 months. It's 6 months long. It takes place at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Facility, FLETC, that's in Brunswick, Georgia. And that's our primary training facility. There's other FLETC locations, like for Border Patrol in Artesia, New Mexico. There's a satellite location in Charleston, for certain specialized training, but we do ours all in Brunswick, Georgia. And that's a 6-month program. And that's going to consist of CITP, Criminal Investigator Training Program. And that is sort of your pedigree as an investigator. The nice thing about that is once you have that certification, and that's a 12-week program, you can take it to other agencies and likewise bring it to HSI. So people have changed agencies, and I'll talk on that a little bit more in a moment. But you have that, and you don't have to go through that program again, because that's your investigator certification. And then the second half is HSI SAT, HSI Special Agent Training Program. And that's going to be a 14-week add-on, and that's agency specific. And that really delves into the specific investigations that HSI does, our techniques and how we like to do things, which is a little bit different than the FLETC style, but very, very close. So that in total is a 26-week program, 6 months. As I said, some people will jump from agency to agency. I will say this. I've been in law enforcement now 26 years by far, and I've worked for multiple agencies. This is the best job I've ever had. And it is what we call a destination agency. It is where other law enforcement officers and people, street hires and so forth are trying to get to. Very, very rarely, it's almost a unicorn at this point. You see an HSI special agent going to another agency, like taking that CIT certificate and going over to EPA or the VA or anywhere else. But very often, and again, as a recruiter, I see it all the time. Border Patrol applicants, CBP applicants, Secret Service applicants. We had a couple of people apply recently from FBI, ATF, and so forth. They're trying to get to HSI. So I think that speaks volumes about our agency.
Can I ask you, since you just mentioned that, John, and I'm not trying to make this longer than it should be, but since you brought it up, why is that? Why is it that you feel that HSI has been the best job for you personally?
I think there's a variety of reasons. For one thing, I think that we try to treat everyone as an adult. We try to treat everyone with respect. There are certain agencies, I won't name the agency, but it's the only one that's larger than ours, tends to be very compartmentalized with how they do things. With us, we can spread our wings a little bit, swim out of our lane. You might be working in a narcotics group, but the financial group has a search warrant. They need extra people. You can go in, jump in and help with their case for a few days, and you kind of get to see what's going on over there. There's a lot of exchange of information within the offices, because we do assist each other very heavily. The other thing is we love working with our partner agencies like ATF, DEA, for example. Love working with those folks. But with DEA, for example, it's sort of a one-trick pony. It's drugs today, drugs tomorrow, and guess what it's going to be next year, Werner? Drugs.
Understood.
Right. With HSI, yeah. And with us, it's like we want you to have a well-rounded career. We want you to work in cyber for a few years, and if you get burned out doing that, or you maybe go to narcotics for a while, and that can be a lot of running and gunning, and okay, people get burned out with that. Hey, I'm going to go over to commercial fraud for a number of years, and the nice thing about it is you can find your niche. The nice thing about HSI is if you bring something to the table, if you've got a background in accounting, if you've got a background in business management, even in art history, because we do artifact repatriation. We repatriate artifacts back to the native nations and to overseas, foreign nations. We have a 500-year-old samurai sword that's about, the other end of the building right now in a supervisor's office, waiting to go back to Japan. It's being repatriated back to Japan. So even if you have that type of background, you can find a niche here in HSI, and you can find something you really enjoy doing. I'm one of the subject matter experts for aviation. Why? Because I had my pilot's licenses. I was going to be an airline pilot before I got into law enforcement. And then I just ended up branching off into law enforcement. They called first before the airlines did, offered me a job and a career, and that's the way I went. But now, because I know the system and I know about general aviation, I specialize in that. So again, if you have something that you're bringing to the table, there's a very good chance that you'll be able to find, sort of your special place within the agency.
I think it's really great you mentioned all that, because somebody did ask that earlier about the skills, because you mentioned during your presentation that you didn't have to have a particular degree, and you answered a lot of that right now, and that answered the question to the person who was asking. So
Sure.
I often get this too, well, when those military affiliated students, I'm not trying to talk strictly about the military affiliate, but being that we do, you do a security background investigation, as you should, for this position. What about those people who have had maybe a security clearance in the past? It's been a number of years. They've been out of the military for 5, 10 years or what have you. And now it's, it's passed. So how does that work when it comes to getting the security clearance passed for HSI?
It's not going to make too much of a difference. I get this question quite a bit, actually, because we have people that are coming right off of active service. Actually, we have an intern coming on. She was an intelligence specialist in Korea, and she was doing, general level briefings and so forth. And she's got, top secret clearance already. But here's the thing. The background investigators are handed a packet of an applicant. They're not just going to look and go, oh, this person's already had their background check, and sign off on it. I wouldn't want to do that either, because then what you're doing is you're relying on someone else who you don't even know on whether or not they did their job properly, and you're putting your name to it. So they're putting their name to it. Their supervisor is putting their name to it. They're still going to go through what they have to go through. There might be certain things that might go a little smoother, but especially when it comes to interviews and so forth, they don't necessarily have to really, delve too deep into certain things, but obviously they're still going to do what's required of them. So understandably so, because again, their name is going on it.
I have a question here from Anna, John, that she's overseas, and she basically is saying, well, I'm currently overseas, but do I have to be in the US to apply and go through the process?
No, I don't believe you're required to be, because again, a lot of this is done virtually. Most of the interviews are being done virtually. So, again, the application, usajobs.gov, the non-proctored, writing sample, that test is done on computer. The testing for the proctor exam, that might be an issue, but I would inquire with headquarters, or excuse me, with Office of Personnel Management, as far as testing locations wherever you are overseas. There may be some type of satellite, college or something like that can capably do that, or possibly might be able to put it off until you return to the United States. And you can make arrangements. I have seen them do that. Again, your mileage may vary. I don't want to speak for them, but I have seen that done where they've delayed.
I have another question here, and I'm just trying to clarify again for those who may have joined late or what have you. And then you had mentioned this during your presentation, and I realize that you work at the Phoenix office and you're trying to hire there, but we also discussed about our students being across the United States and what have you, and applying to other locations. So the question here from Alejandro is Phoenix the main location, or are there others in the US?
Oh gosh, yeah, no. We have over 250 offices around the country, and we have large field offices, which are known as SAC offices, because they're run by a special agent in charge. And a SAC office might cover a portion of a state, an entire state, or even overlap into more than one state. I want to say there's 27 SAC offices now, I give or take one, because now we added, I think, 1 or 2 in the last few years. But in Arizona, it just happens to be SAC Arizona, because we just cover the one state. But in addition to the field offices scattered around the country, like SAC New England, SAC Atlanta, and SAC Seattle, there'll also be resident agent in charge RAC offices, and they might have anywhere from 6 to 20 agents, depending. Our Casa Grande office, for example, is not that far from Phoenix. I think there's 2 working groups there, so there's about 18 agents that are in Casa Grande. We might have a resident agent, an RA office, and that might literally be a single agent, or maybe a pair of agents. I know up in Prescott here in Arizona, we've got 2 agents up there to cover that sort of mid-state location. It's kind of a rural area, so they can cover it very capably. And you'll find those scattered throughout the United States. Just depends on the amount of work that's there. So there's offices again across the nation, and we get the agents anyway. We have take-home rides. So we actually have government vehicles. We are allowed to respond from home. There are days we've gone to work, we've never seen the office that day because we go to a surveillance location, do what we have to do, and then we actually return home at the end of the day. So we're allowed to live within a 50-mile radius of the office. So that's not too bad,
No, for sure. Without that, I mean, we have so many questions. So I apologize to everyone. These amazing questions coming in. We're probably not going to be able to get to all of them, and we so appreciate John being here. But if we can just a few more here, John. This is a really good question because our students graduate weekly, John, from the university once they complete their course requirements. So they have their degree and they literally are graduating that week. So our classes start every week. So this question from Christopher is, if I graduate in January, would it be best to apply before or after they graduate?
They graduate in January. Well, the announcement is probably coming the end of January. So chances are the graduation will have already taken place. So I think that question will resolve itself. The weird thing about some of these announcements, they can be a little quirky. If you look at the job announcements, they look almost identical and you think, oh, someone just cuts and pastes. And okay, because it's a lot of the same material. Believe it or not, I found this out a while ago. They actually write each one of them individually. Now they do write using the same format, so they look almost identical, but they will change certain things. And one of those things is who can apply as far as the education requirements. Again, the requirements are 4 years of law enforcement experience, 4 years, 4-year degree, or a combination of the two. So hypothetically, an officer with 2 years on and has an associate's degree is eligible to apply, just sort of FYI. But when it comes to the decree, if you're degree, once you are eligible, some of the requirements will say must already have the degree at the time of application. Other announcements will say must have it by the time of appointment, meaning when you get the position, which could be a year because the hiring process can take up to a year. We've seen as little as 6 months, but it could go to a year. Or the third one might say must have earned their degree within X amount of days of the close of this announcement. And we've seen, 60 days, 80 days, and what have you. So they're looking for people that are either recent graduates or in that case, somebody who's about to graduate because they know the timing of that announcement. So you got to pay attention to that sort of a detail. But I think in that particular case of Chris, was asking the question?
Yeah, so it was Chris.
Yeah, I think in his case, it's going to be probably the end of January, maybe beginning of February. So that problem may resolve itself. So.
Somebody asked earlier too, John, I kind of bounced over their question, but this question relates to that one. Is in the application process, is it separate if we are looking to do the forensic interview and or criminal analyst role?
Those would all be separate. These are all separate jobs. You'd have to look for those jobs specifically on USA Jobs. Now, one of the things I can also suggest is setting up trigger words or agencies. You can set up alerts within USA Jobs to text you, email you, whatever, when certain jobs become available. The other thing is that is definitely worth mentioning. When you first get into the federal government, it might look overwhelming. It might look, insurmountable, or gosh, there's a lot of boilerplate in this job description. Don't be intimidated. The worst they can say is no. Sure. By all means, apply.
Absolutely.
And whether it's HSI or FBI or anybody else, it doesn't matter. Go for it. And the other thing is, even if let's say you're really set on HSI, because hopefully I've done my job and you really like HSI, but there's no openings right now, but you want to get your career started. You definitely want to get that ball rolling. I get it. There's nothing wrong with going to one agency and then going to another. The nice thing about the federal government is they will account for your time. So your service time in the federal government carries over, accrues, and carries over to your next job. Likewise, they try to preserve your pay grade on the whole. Again, every agency is a little different, but they generally will try to keep your pay grade. So let's say you're a GS7 with another agency and you got a couple of years in and so forth. HSI is going to try to hire you as a GS7. And even if the job opening is a lower starting position, let's say they only hire up to GS5, they're going to make you a GS5, but they might make you like a step 8, because within each pay grade, there are 10 steps. So you have the pay grade, and then you have incremental steps. They're going to try to match your pay the best they can. So there's nothing wrong if you want to get your federal career started with starting with one agency and then transferring to another one, applying, you know, almost as soon as you get the job. Nothing wrong with that.
Makes sense. I want to ask one more question. There's so many questions here. We'll absolutely get these questions answered. And if you don't mind, we'll come back to you if we have any additional ones. But the one last question I wanted to, because our students and graduates tend to fall potentially in these age categories, and I know you mentioned the age category earlier, but somebody had mentioned, well, if I'm 36 and if I'm interviewing before I turn 37, does this count me out from all positions within HSI?
Not for all positions, certainly not. The technical enforcement officer, I don't believe has that age limit. Criminal analyst certainly doesn't have it. So there are a number of other positions. Also, if that's something that's a real concern, it is a little. I'm going to tell you a little backdoor way of doing this. There are certain agencies, even within DHS, Customs and Border Protection, Enforcement Removal Operations, and Border Patrol. They actually hire up to age 60.
Oh wow!
So if you are on that cusp, and you're not sure, you can always apply to one of those. Again, nothing wrong with changing agencies. I've done it twice. So with, you know, I went from Border Patrol to ERO to HSI, and a lot of folks around here have done the same. Again, it's a destination agency. They've gotten in at age 37, 38 with, you know, Border Patrol or CBP, and then they put their application in HSI. Well, they've already got their career started. HSI will make the adjustment, and they will actually push out, because you're already a law enforcement officer, they will push out your retirement date to 58, 59, what have you, in order to complete those 20 years.
That's great news. That's really great. Well, thank you, John, for that informative presentation. And it looks like we're actually here beyond the time, but thank you again. We do appreciate all your time today. I know you're a very busy person. You juggle a lot. So we're so privileged to have you here. If you want to connect with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security investigations and other organizations that are actively hiring for full-time positions and internships, please log into your Handshake through your student portal. We recommend checking Handshake and UAGC Connect regularly for more career services events, regarding this HSI information session. In a few days, you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to this recording and information about HSI careers. I know we had trouble with the video earlier, John, so we'll try and get that out to you, our students and graduates. So it was a really great video. I'd love to have a copy of that. And if you have any questions for the career services team on your resume, cover letter, or job search, please email career services. That's both words together, no dots, no underlines or anything. Career services all together, one word, at UAGC.edu, or log into Handshake through your student portal to explore more resources. Many thanks again to John from HSI for joining us today. And many thanks to you, our students and graduates, for attending UAGC. Thank you for attending this event today, and we look forward to seeing you at more career services hosted events. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks again, John. It was awesome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all your time. Thank you.
Appreciate you.